The Siege of Leningrad, 872 Days of Hell. September 8, 1941. A mother watches her infant daughter's breathing grow shallow, not from illness, from hunger. Outside, German artillery pounds the city that bears Lenin's name. Inside, a family debates whether to eat their pet cat or save it for tomorrow. This is day one of what would become the longest, most devastating siege in modern warfare. The trap closes. When Wehrmacht forces encircled Leningrad in September 1941, Hitler's directive was chillingly clear: starve the city into submission. No surrender would be accepted. The plan was methodical: cut off all supply lines, destroy food stockpiles, and wait for 3 million Soviet citizens to simply disappear. The German High Command calculated it would take weeks, perhaps months. They were wrong by nearly 2.5 years. What they didn't anticipate was confronting something more powerful than their war machine: the unbreakable will of ordinary people facing extinction. The siege of Leningrad would become a 872-day testament to humanity's capacity for both unspeakable cruelty and transcendent resilience. When food becomes memory. By November 1941, the city's bread ration had plummeted to 125 grams per day for civilians, a slice barely thicker than a playing card, made from sawdust, wallpaper paste, and whatever grain could be scrounged. Families gathered around these meager portions like communion wafers, dividing them with surgical precision. But numbers cannot capture the reality of watching your city consume itself. Leather belts disappeared first, boiled into bitter soup. Then came the wallpaper, scraped and eaten for its flour-based paste. Carpenter's glue became a delicacy. Books weren't just burned for warmth. Their binding glue was harvested and eaten. Even dirt from sugar warehouses bombed months earlier was sifted and resifted for any remaining crystals. The city's cats and dogs vanished within months. Pigeons followed. Then came the unthinkable and the unspoken. The Orchestra of the Damned. August 9, 1942. In the Great Hall of the Leningrad Philharmonic, skeletal musicians raise their instruments. Some can barely hold them. Outside, German shells whistle overhead. Inside, Dmitri Shostakovich's Seventh Symphony, his Leningrad Symphony, is about to premiere in the very city that inspired it. This performance wasn't just a concert. It was an act of defiance that reverberated around the world. Musicians who had survived on 125 grams of bread performed a 80-minute symphony for an audience of survivors. The performance was broadcast globally, a sonic middle finger to Hitler's siege. But the symphony represented something deeper: the refusal of human culture to die, even when human bodies were failing en masse. The mathematics of survival. The siege transformed Leningrad into a laboratory of human endurance. Citizens developed intricate survival systems that would have impressed NASA engineers. They calculated calorie expenditure down to the step, mapping the city's warmest buildings and shortest food lines with scientific precision. Water became a strategic resource requiring military-level planning. With the city's water system frozen or bombed, residents trekked daily to the Neva River, hauling buckets through artillery barrages and sub-zero temperatures. The ice holes became community gathering points, places where neighbors shared warmth, rumors, and occasionally hope. Dead bodies became part of the urban landscape, stacked like cordwood in courtyards and on street corners, too numerous to bury in the frozen ground. Yet around these scenes of apocalyptic horror, life persisted with stubborn normalcy. Schools remained open, theaters performed, the trams ran when fuel allowed. The miracle of Lake Ladoga. When the lake froze solid in winter 1941, Soviet engineers saw salvation: the road of life, a treacherous supply route across the ice. Trucks laden with food raced across the frozen lake under constant German bombardment, drivers knowing that a single crack in the ice meant death in the frigid waters below. This wasn't just logistics. It was a lifeline operated by heroes who drove through blizzards and artillery fire, delivering flour and hope in equal measure. The road operated for 152 days each winter, with drivers making multiple trips daily, many never returning. During the siege's darkest months, this frozen highway was the only thing preventing total starvation. It saved perhaps 1 million lives, one perilous truck run at a time. The children who never grew up. Perhaps no account captures the siege's horror more precisely than the diary of 11-year-old Tanya Savicheva. Her entries are bureaucratic in their brevity, each documenting a family member's death. Zhenya died on deck, 28th at 12 p.m. 1941. Granny died on Jan, 25th at 3 p.m. 1942. Leica died on March, 5th at 5 a.m. 1942. The final entry reads, Savichevs died, everyone died, only Tanya is left. Tanya herself died shortly after the siege ended, her body too damaged by starvation to recover. Her diary became evidence at the Nuremberg trials, 9 pages that condemned an entire war machine. The breaking point that never came. Winter 1942. The siege reaches its crescendo of horror. Deaths peak at 100,000 per month, more than many entire battles of World War II. The city has consumed everything edible, and then things that weren't. Cannibalism, once unthinkable, becomes whispered reality. German intelligence reports confidently predict the city's collapse within days. But Leningrad didn't break. Instead, something remarkable happened. As conditions reached their absolute worst, the city's resistance paradoxically strengthened. Neighbors who had eyed each other suspiciously began sharing their last crumbs. Strangers carried dying people to hospitals they knew had no medicine. Musicians played for audiences of skeletons. The very extremity of their situation created bonds that transcended normal human relationships. They were no longer just Soviet citizens defending their city. They were the last representatives of civilization itself, and they would not yield. Liberation and legacy. On January 27, 1944, Soviet forces finally broke the German encirclement. The siege was over. The cost was almost incomprehensible. Over 1 million civilian deaths, most from starvation and disease. The city's population had fallen from 3.2 million to barely 600,000. But Leningrad still stood. The survivors emerged into sunlight like figures from another world, gaunt, hollow-eyed, but undefeated. They had achieved something unprecedented in military history. A civilian population had outlasted a modern army's siege through sheer force of will. The echo of endurance. The siege of Leningrad stands as perhaps the most extreme test of human resilience ever recorded. It proved that people can endure almost anything when united by purpose greater than individual survival. These weren't soldiers trained for hardship. They were teachers, factory workers, artists, and children who chose to endure hell rather than surrender their humanity. In our contemporary world of abundance, their story serves as both warning and inspiration. It reminds us that civilization is fragile, maintained not by institutions or governments, but by ordinary people making extraordinary choices when everything else fails. The ghosts of Leningrad whisper a truth across the decades. In humanity's darkest hours, we discover not just our capacity for evil, but our inexhaustible reserves of courage, compassion, and defiance. Sometimes, surviving is the greatest victory of all. 872 days, Over 1 million dead, one city that refused to die. This is how ordinary people became legends and how hell became the birthplace of heroes.